Hi, and thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Life with Five podcast. We're really excited to have you with us. Hope you're having a terrific start to your week. Yes. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about what to do when you feel stuck in your marriage. Maybe you feel like, man, I'm just going through the motions, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of movement. And it can be frustrating. It can feel maybe really like you're just down and don't know what to do.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about what you can do when you feel stuck, because the truth is you don't have to stay where you're at forever. Yeah. We've all been there. We want to move forward, but we just can't seem to figure out how. So we're going to share some practical steps that you can take and important principles to help you move forward if you feel stuck in your marriage. But this could also apply very easily to parenthood, to your career, maybe issues with family or friends also.
Absolutely. That's really good and very true. I want you to think about, as we start here, I want you to think about flying. Now, I am not a huge fan of flying. I don't do like a ton of flying or anything, but I'm not a huge fan of it. I really only do it because I know I have to do it to get from where I am to where I want to go. It's a little bit faster. But if I am going to fly, I want to do it as quickly as possible, get it done and over with. So I look for a nonstop flight. Come on, these are straight from heaven, right? Nonstop flights. Because who wants a layover? Who wants to spend a bunch of time in a destination that you're not even going to be doing anything? So I'll pay more money so I don't have to wait. But sometimes in life, and I think a lot of times when we feel like maybe we're stuck, maybe we're just more in a layover and we got to figure out, what do we do? How do we navigate all of that? And because we're going to all find ourselves in connecting airports, waiting for our flight. There's a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different things that can come up. There's delays, all that good stuff. We have our plans, and then life hits us.
Right. And when we feel stuck, there's particular feelings that can become attached to that, because really getting stuck is, a result of unmet or unrealized expectations. And first of all, being stuck can create frustration. When you have to wait longer than you expected to wait, or frustration happens because you know where you are and you know where you want to go, but there's this gap in between, the expectation gap. So if we go back to that flight analogy, we can end up stuck for a lot of reasons. Maybe because we didn't get there in time. Maybe the flight was delayed and that created a chain reaction. We miss our connection, that kind of thing. Or maybe it's because of somebody else's poor decisions. Maybe the airline overbooked the flight. Or the captain didn't get enough sleep the night before. I don't know, whatever. Or maybe we're just not willing to go to a place to get to where we ultimately need to go. Our flight gets rerouted, something of that sort. And in marriage, maybe you thought your marriage would be like super exciting, but instead it just seems kind of tame and maybe even boring.
Yeah. So you're frustrated.
Yes.
So that's the feeling of frustration. Let's move kind of the next level, I think. It's the feeling of bitterness. I think when you let frustration go unchecked for a long period of time, it can often lead to bitterness. Frustration tends to create friction, but bitterness creates distance. And so this is where, Carol shared kind of a little bit of our story and how she was at the point she didn't even want to hear my voice. She didn't want to be around me. And that's what bitterness will do. It'll make you just want to push that other person away. I've also found that if you give in to bitterness, it's easy to create narratives in your head. So, pretty soon you're telling yourself every time your husband doesn't text you right back that, he doesn't care about me, or he's off doing something he shouldn't be doing. He's with this person, or he's with the guys and he gives them a higher priority than me. You're creating all these narratives, right? Or maybe, you come home and your wife doesn't have like a 5-course dinner ready for you. And you're like, what has she been doing all day? Does she not know that I appreciate when she does these things? Why does she not do this all the time? And you start spinning all these things. Oh, she was probably wasting her time. She probably went to Hobby Lobby. That's what she did. Or she went to Target. She said she was going to go get something and she spent money on a bunch of other things. And you create all... Now, some of those might be true, but...
I tend to get distracted at Target. Or maybe this has happened to you. Once in a while, I have a dream that Ray did something terrible, and I will wake up so angry with him over something that didn't even happen.
I'm
not
innocent.
Even close.
I'm innocent, people.
But seriously, bitterness is toxic and it can seep into our soul, into our marriage and our family. All you can do is see the negative and you feel absolutely justified in just ripping out your husband because of something he did in a dream.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
Or
make
if
any
they really
sense.
are doing something, maybe even so.
Right. But bitterness skews your perception by distorting reality. And ultimately, it robs you of the opportunity to experience hope and healing in your relationship.
Yeah. So there's another side, though. We're talking about frustration and bitterness. Being stuck can also lead to feelings of loneliness. So maybe you're listening to this, you're watching, and you're thinking, you know what? I feel stuck and I don't feel necessarily even frustrated anymore. I don't even have those emotions. I don't feel bitter. I just feel completely alone. And we spent some time talking about relationships with people who are frustrating you. But when you have those unmet or those unrealized expectations, honestly, it often leads to feelings of disillusionment. And that's a sinking feeling. And maybe there's a thought in your mind that no one else understands, no one knows what I'm going through. And when we get to this point, we are actually in really dangerous territory. So you want to pay attention because the devil loves to get us into places where we are alone. Isolation is the devil's playground. I promise you. Notice that he didn't come after Eve and Adam.
Right.
He came after just Eve when she was alone. In fact, Genesis 2:18, God says it's not good for man to be alone.
Yeah, and marriage is meant to be complementary. We don't complete each other, right? Only Jesus can do that, but
That's
we
good.
do help each other. And if not, then we can end up in one of two types of an unhealthy marriage. So the first one we're going to talk about is called an A-frame marriage. And if you think about the letter A, it has two sides and they are leaning against each other. And this is unhealthy because it's dependent, right? It's ultimately dependent on each other. And if one person falls, then you both fall because there's nothing to hold you up.
Right.
And then if you think about an H-frame marriage, the letter H has two sides and there's, this gap in the middle. And that's unhealthy too because each person is really independent of each other. So if one person falls, the other person might not even know about it. And chances are if loneliness is really pervasive and long-lasting in your relationship, then you're probably in an H-frame marriage.
Yeah, if you feel alone, you may feel like maybe you've lost the support or the care of your spouse, and that's honestly a painful place to be. And our heart, honestly, it just breaks for you because we've been there. We know what that's like, and it hurts so badly. But I do want you to know that you're not alone. First of all, God is with you, and there is hope, and there is healing. There's a path forward. We're a testament of that.
Yeah.
It's not over. There's greater things ahead of you. So I just want to encourage you with that. But we also want to share some ways to move past those feelings of frustration and bitterness and loneliness so that you don't feel stuck.
Yeah, and the first is you really have to identify and work through your feelings.
Yeah, so it's safe to say that I'm not always great at processing my feelings, all right, because I'm forward focused. So Carol's
Yeah.
not necessarily that way. You like to kind of take your time and think through things, right? So I tend to spend a lot of time on the here, or not in the here and the now. She is much better at appreciating the moment. However, for me, because I avoid my feelings, that doesn't mean that they necessarily just go away magically. They don't happen. That doesn't happen. In fact, they shape and affect our future, and they shape and affect my future. That's why the healthiest, I think, forward-thinking people are the ones who understand the importance of processing through instead of going around their feelings.
Yeah, and often the avoidance of feelings is actually what keeps us stuck in the first place. So
Right.
if you don't want to be stuck anymore, start by working through those feelings. And like Ray said, I do feel my feelings, but if they're negative feelings, I don't enjoy that so much.
Only the good ones.
Right? So I tend to stuff those down and not deal with them because honestly, it takes work and effort and energy that I don't always have to give to work through those types of feelings. And then over time, frustration builds up, and it just suddenly comes out in a big old mess of snot and tears, and it's not pretty.
A lovely picture for you, all right? For years, I would have told you that I'm not a super emotional person, meaning that I don't have a whole lot of feelings. Like I joke about it. I have no heart. I'm not getting my children a dog, whether they want one or not, no matter how much they beg. They got people at church that are like, wanting to start GoFundMe so they can get a dog. It's a whole plot they've hatched. But in fact, for all of us, though, we feel feelings, including myself. And the question is really whether or not they're ruling our life. That's really a better way of looking at it. Unfortunately, for me, because I didn't recognize my feelings, I didn't identify them, I was destroying my marriage because I had feelings that I was unwilling to take responsibility for. And so my response was, well, this isn't my fault. This is your fault. Point the finger at Carol. Because you're doing this, this is why I'm justifying all of my bad habits, my bad feelings, my bad emotions. I'm laying it all at her doorstep so I don't have to take responsibility. Since then, I've learned that feelings belong to us, and how we take responsibility for what we feel is very, very important. So if you're listening to this and maybe you're saying, well, I wouldn't do this if my spouse didn't do that. You're responsible for your feelings and your actions.
Yeah, and feelings are not bad necessarily. Right. God made us as emotional creatures. They serve a purpose, but they really need to be more of something that we just pay attention to. It's an indicator. Like if you think about the dashboard in your car, when a light pops up, it might be something that you need to pull over the car and deal with it immediately. Or it could just be that you need an oil change in the next week or so, and that's good too. But either way, if you keep driving when that indicator light is on, eventually something bad is going to happen. Yeah. So they're there as a trigger to tell us that we need to ask ourselves why we're feeling what we are feeling. Dig a little bit deeper, whether it's good or bad. In other words, we want to dig beneath the feeling, get to the root of the issue. So for Ray, control is super important to him.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I say that peace is really important to me, but we've got to go beyond that and figure out why that is. And oftentimes it can even go back to our childhood with the things that we experienced as kids and those needs that we felt weren't being met. So that's a big thing to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I actually just had someone tell me the other day, she's like, when I was a kid or I was younger, she was a teenager, I think, she said, I just prayed that God would take away all my feelings, all my emotions, because she didn't grow up in a great situation. She felt angry and afraid and all these just kind of mix of emotions that she wanted to go away. And she said it wasn't until she was older that she began to realize that feelings weren't necessarily her enemy, but there was some pain she needed to work through. And until she was willing to go through that painful past, she wasn't really able to get to the hope and healing. And I just want to encourage you, sometimes it's going to look worse before it gets better, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, so you got to keep going. And I want you to know that God can help you in this.
Yeah, that's so good. And second, we have to close that gap in our expectations. And in order to do that, we have to talk about the gap in our expectations, right? When you feel stuck, you can do one of a few different things. First, you can lower your expectations. And we've actually met people who they were stuck, but they didn't even know it because their expectations were so low. And Ray likes to joke that if you set the bar really low, you're always going to jump over it.
That's right.
Overachievers. Yeah. And then you can also choose to maintain your expectations. Hey, the ship might be sinking, but at least it hasn't capsized yet, so we must be doing okay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But unfortunately, you also continue in that frustration and continue moving towards loneliness and depression and anxiety as you watch situations slowly deteriorate.
Yeah, so what we want to do is not lower our expectations. That's not healthy, or just maintain our expectations. I mean, there are times when you just kind of get through it. I certainly points of life, but we don't want to do that for prolonged periods of time. Right. What we want to do is learn how to change our focus. And so the only way I know to fight disappointment is to focus on the one who never disappoints. And I love what Hebrews says. It says in chapter 12, verse 2, fix your eyes on Jesus. In other words, focus on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. For the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. That's such a powerful verse when you really think about it. And here's the thing. You may be in a situation in your marriage, with your spouse, in your family, where they're not willing to discuss moving forward. So you have this expectation gap that you're trying to talk about, but they're just not willing to do. you have to realize that even though you need that to happen, they may not, but there's still a way forward. And by changing your focus to Jesus, we find that hope that we need each and every day to face the giants that we feel like might be insurmountable. And I love what verse 3 says, because if you just keep going on in this verse, it says, consider him, being Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart.
Yeah, as we consider what Christ went through for us, we realize that we're not alone and that purpose can be found through great pain.
Yeah.
But as a caveat, we are not telling you to stay in a dangerous or abusive situation at all. It's one thing to endure heartache and discomfort and pain, but it's another one to object yourself to situations that are going to be harmful to you.
Yeah. And so this next part that we want to talk about is focus on the process, not just progress. Okay. I think sometimes progress is deceiving because we can move ahead, but it's not, maybe we're not doing it the right way. And this one's hard for me because I like to move forward. I mean, I think all of us do. We like to look back and say, I achieved this and I did that. We don't want to focus on the bad. It's like when I trade stocks, I don't want to tell people when I traded a good stock, like I made money on it. I don't want to tell people when I lost money, right? But however, over the years, I've realized that healthy processes are actually the key to unlocking healthy progress, right? And you may get what you want if you can make progress by just forcing your way or manipulating your way forward, but you won't get there and be healthy, and so you won't be able to stay there. I love what one person said. They said that talent can take you to places, but it's your character that keeps you there. And so your character is really what you're trying to develop, and when you're focused on the process, you'll do that. If you're focused just on the progress, just on the destination, you might take some shortcuts because when you feel stuck, you fall prey to those lies, like maybe a little cheating over here, or maybe you could try this, maybe doing this, and you'll manipulate the situation.
Yeah, and what we really want to develop is an M-frame marriage. So we talked about the A-frame, we talked about the H-frame earlier in the episode. The M-frame, if you think about the letter M, has two sides, and they come together in the middle with God at the center. And that's a healthy relationship. It's interdependent. If one person falls, the other one is there to pick them up and to help. And in an M-frame marriage, we learn to depend on God. We learn to lean on him, to have a healthy sense of who he's made us each to be as individuals, while not losing sight of the purpose that he's called us to as a marriage or a married couple as well.
Yeah, I love what Les and Leslie Parrott said. They put it perfectly, I thought. In an interdependent marriage, joy is doubled and sorrow is cut in half. That's a beautiful statement right there. That one line is worth the whole show, but such a powerful statement. Well, we want to make sure, though, to give you some really practical tips as well. And so the first one is just serve others. Carol is actually the one who came up with this, and I thought it was so good because I think when you feel stuck, you focus on yourself, right? What I don't have, where I'm not at, what they're not doing for me. So when you serve others, you break out of that mindset. Serving others is a great way to shift your feelings. It's also a great way to live out your purpose. Listen, we were created to serve others. We're not created to just do life for ourselves and get all we want, and it's all about me. You were created to serve others. Jesus came to serve. Yes. If he was a servant of all, then certainly we should serve others as well.
So good. And don't assume that suffering is meant to harm you. Romans 5 verses 3 and 4 says, we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. So the road to character and hope is actually paved by suffering and perseverance. And we don't grow if we don't experience some pain every now and then. That's what produces character in us.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you need to run towards suffering, but I would also say you don't need to run away from suffering. When it'll find you at times in your life. Yeah, there is purpose. That's great. And then another tip we want to tell you is write down 10 things you're thankful for. Gratitude has the power to shift, again, your mindset and squash that negative thinking. Maybe you're constantly focused on something, so you're just going to say, you know what? I'm going to focus on what's good. Maybe even write down 10 things that you appreciate about your spouse. And then a bonus tip here is you could just leave leave it somewhere for them to find, all right? Just let them know you love them, you appreciate them, and some of the things that you really like about them.
Yes. And last but certainly not least, read your Bible.
Yeah.
It's so important to put the truth of God's word into our minds and our hearts. It gives us perspective and it helps us to see the bigger picture at hand. It also fills us with the love that God has for us and his grace and his hope so we can extend that to others. And as our perspective starts to change, we can really start to see more clearly what that path forward is.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can work through, a lot of places. You don't have to do everything all at once, but I'd encourage you pick a few things, maybe a few areas that you need to work on. Of course, be praying about that. If you need somebody to talk to, find a trusted mentor or Christian counselor. There's some wonderful people out there. But I would just encourage you, don't do life alone. Don't stay stuck. There's hope for you. And so we're praying for you. I want to say thank you again so much for watching. If you could do us a favor, one thing that really helps us to be able to reach more people is if you would leave a like on the show. It just helps us to get the word out about what we're doing and hopefully infuse faith into more marriages and families. Of course, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell to get notified of all future episodes, and drop us a comment. Let us know what you're thinking, what's going on in your life. We'd love to be able to pray for you, like I said earlier. But thank you again so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.